Today's video is the most important video I've made on this channel to date. It's my 15-year plan. So the reason that I started this YouTube channel and make these Airbnb videos is because Airbnb has literally changed my life. So let me tell you guys a story. I'm a big believer in like serendipity and things happening for the right reasons and connecting the dots and so on. And about 4 years ago, I was in San Francisco visiting a friend and wasn't really expecting much of anything other than a good time. I was at a cocktail party, I was introduced to somebody, and we started talking, and I asked him what he did, and his response was kind of curious to me. He said he was on sabbatical. I'd never really met anybody on sabbatical that wasn't, much older and like a professor or something, so I didn't really know what he meant, and I just started to ask some more questions. And it turns out he had just sold a company, and he was enjoying his time off, and I said, well, what do you do to like fill your days? What do you do every single day? And he said, oh, it's kind of interesting. I've got this Airbnb apartment that I've got going, and I'm a superhost, and I'd never heard the word superhost before. I'd obviously heard about Airbnb. I'd never really thought much about it. I had really thought it was much more like a younger generation and couch surfing sort of thing and air mattresses, and it just didn't really seem to fit this stereotype of this guy, who just sold a company and he was on sabbatical. And so he went on to explain that he lived in a great neighborhood in San Francisco, and he had a separate entrance and a separate little apartment, and he loved hosting people, and he was super selective about who he brought into his apartment, and he met really great friends, and he was just enjoying the whole process. And it was so different for me because I was a landlord and for many years, and while I enjoyed it from a business perspective, this guy was really deriving joy and pleasure and satisfaction from his interaction with these different people. And I'd never thought of myself as a super host, and so it was sort of like, there's something there I really should figure out a little bit more. So I got back to New York, and I had a meeting scheduled with a broker. I had an apartment that I was trying to list in a normal 12-month lease, and it was the same old story. It was like, oh, well, we should reduce the price. It's been on the market for 30 days. It hasn't, it hasn't rented, and more specifically, he said people have already signed up for the leases for the school year, and that's the prime season. It was all this, stuff, and it sounded like a bunch of excuses. Mind you, we'd already dropped the price twice before I even went to San Francisco. So I stopped and I thought to myself, here's somebody who I really thought was doing a great job and having a lot of fun and also making a lot of money using Airbnb. And then I'm going the traditional route, the one that I've always known, and I'm having some conflict and some pause, and maybe I should stop and think about this and reconsider. So that's exactly what we did. We decided to get into business and go furnish this place. We wanted to make money at it. So what we did was, just have a really good, clean, modern design aesthetic, but also really budget minded. And so we bought used furniture, lightly used furniture where possible. And we wanted to make this thing, photograph well and be comfortable and approachable for everybody. And we did that, and then went through, fumbled around, didn't really know how to use Airbnb, had no real idea about the photography or the marketing of it. I wish I had a channel like this to help me along, actually. But then we went and we published, and we had no idea how long it would be until we had our first bite. And believe it or not, it was actually really quick, matter of days. So our first guests were really cool. They were 3 guys from down under, some Aussie mates, and they were just super cool and super friendly and upbeat, and we just really enjoyed having them, at our place. But as luck would have it, or not luck, bad luck would have it, we had a small disaster. As it turned out, there was some construction being done on the street, and I guess a water main broke, or I'm not exactly sure what happened, but the basement where they were staying actually flooded. And so we got this emergency text and call that there was 2 inches of water in the basement, and this has never happened to us ever. So we were just like, what? And so we rushed down there and went over and checked it out, and sure enough, they were walking in water up to their ankles, and we were pulling furniture and getting it all out, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? Could this be any worse? So I was really distraught and frustrated, and here I was doing all these things to try and build this new business and have a great experience, especially for our very first guests, and just nothing I could do and nothing I could prevent. It was just, could have happened to anybody. I could have been living down there, a long-term tenant could have been living down there. And so I just paused, and my wife and I spoke about it, and we're just like, listen, shit happens, and you have to roll with the punches. And that's where coming back to sort of the why we were doing this was really helpful for us, and we realized that we couldn't have prevented it. It wasn't a problem that we caused, and the people that were staying there were so cool, and that was really helpful. They like got it too. They realized that this just could have happened to their apartment, and it does in fact happen. And so between my wife and I sitting down and connecting with like our why, and the guests from these strangers from Australia just being so like understanding, we sort of settled down and into it and got to think about it a little bit more. And you know, this could have been like a game breaker. We could have like sold the furniture and gone back to long term, but we decided that, you know, there's something here. These people were super cool. We enjoyed hosting them, and I really think and thought then that Airbnb is sort of the way of the future, and so we persevered. So as it turned out, the guests were leaving like the next day, so while they were inconvenienced, it wasn't the end of the world. And then we got the proper like cleanup crews, and we took care of everything and dealt with like the, you know, mold and remediation and things that you would have to do if you owned the property yourself and lived there, or if you rented it long term. Like, there was nothing about the fact that it was Airbnb that was different, except for the fact that these were people that we'd only recently met and they were on their way out. And you know, we apologized. We actually bought them a nice dinner and tried to make it as good as possible. And you know, they were so cool about it. They actually gave us a really favorable review, and they wanted to come visit us again. And that sort of mutual respect and reciprocity was really helpful in building our commitment to sort of the community, because I think I would have been really cool under those circumstances too. Like, yes, it's my vacation, and yes, it was an inconvenience, but guess what? That could happen at a hotel. And you know, if you're dealing with good people, everyone's sort of rational and civil, and you all come together, you know, and it worked out just fine. So I recovered from the trauma and all of that, continued to list on Airbnb. Everything was going really well. And I sat down with my accountant one day to just figure out sort of the P&L, and I realized I'm doing so much better than what the broker was unable to rent it for, and he wanted to reduce the price even more and more. And here I am making 2 times, actually even closer to 3 times what I couldn't rent it for long term. And I thought, well, why does this only work here? Can't this work elsewhere? And where else would I want it to work? And so I came up with this like 15-year plan, which was to use Airbnb to buy properties in the places that I wanted to retire. And so I started to think about things that were important to me. Like, I love skiing, and I wanted a ski house in Colorado. And winters in New York can be freezing cold, so I wanted a place down south. And so I found a place in Alabama. And the beautiful thing about the Airbnb and the rent that I was making is that it was 2 to 3 times the long-term rent. And so what I did was, instead of taking the cash out, I actually shortened the mortgage by 50%. Instead of taking out a 30-year mortgage, I took out a 15-year mortgage, which basically means that other people via Airbnb are buying the property for me, and 15 years forward, I'm going to own it outright and use that income to like live on. So that's it. It's pretty simple and straightforward. That's my 15-year plan. That's my why. Airbnb has literally changed my life. And even though you may have a different vision or a different goal using Airbnb as a tool to accomplish that goal, think about your why and think about how you can use Airbnb as a tool to accomplish that. And that's why I've made this channel. I think I have a lot of insight and suggestions and things that I've learned along the way, and I'm happy to share it. So I hope you found this interesting, hopefully inspirational. I realize as I'm looking at the videos, I haven't talked about my why and, you know, why I'm making these videos and why I'm doing Airbnb. So I'm going to start to share that with you a little bit more, and, you know, realize it's a point in time, so it changes, it gets redefined. I constantly am thinking about new things and reassessing. Please leave comments below. Tell us your why. Tell us what your thoughts are. And if you want some more, you know, two-way dialogue, check us out over in our Facebook group. The link is in the description below. That's a fantastic resource, so I encourage you to check it out and contribute. You know, lurk as long as you need, but then contribute. And in the meantime, go ahead and like and share this, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Subscribe, 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 subscribe.